thank you for coming, everyone. The time is due to we have our guest is from our speaker is from Australia, so we couldn't really make him come here at um, what would it be like 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that. So anyway, welcome to Wave Club. This is a monthly occurrence, typically on the first Tuesday of the month. Organized by Josh Jacobs, myself, Bart Ermintrout, Uma Mohan, and Irfan Zabe. Next, Uma, you
Yeah.
yeah. So today we're happy to present Pulin Gong from University of Sydney, and he's going to talk about spatiotemporal dynamics, organizational properties, and functional mechanisms. Um, he's an associate professor in the School of Physics at the University of Sydney. His research focuses on understanding the self-organizing mechanisms of spatiotemporal neural dynamics and the principles of distributed dynamic computation in cortical circuits. He investigates propagating neural waves, coherent spatiotemporal structures, and irregular neural activity variability to uncover how large-scale neural systems perform computation. Recent projects from his group include cortical wave pattern analysis in mice and primates, fractional neural sampling and Levy walk dynamics in collaboration with Fudan University and Kyoto University, and his current student Andrew Lee studies cortical loop dynamics and their applications to AI. Dr. Gong's key contribution lies in linking spatiotemporal wave patterns to distributed neural computation. Um, so there you go. Next slide. Sorry. And you can find out more about Wave Club on our YouTube channel, where all the recordings are, and Blue Sky. And finally, about the structure, um, he'll give a 40-minute presentation, leaving 20 minutes for questions. You can use the Q&A or chat feature to type in your questions, and we'll bring you up on stage at the end if you want. Each month, we'll have a different speaker, and I'd be great for nominations. Self-nominations, very welcome. I think we're filled up until like January. Is that right, Uma?
Yeah, so seeking nominations for next year. If you have work that you'd like to share that's relevant to traveling waves, please let us know.
So without further, I think, is this it? I think this is the last slide, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's our upcoming speakers. That's right.
Yeah.
So Mark Kramer on December 2nd and Junyoung Moon on January 6th. So hope to see you at those. Those will be at our regular time, noon, I think. Or maybe not the Korean one.
Yeah, January is going to be a different time
Yeah,
because
January will be a different time, but Mark will be on at noon because he's at Hopkins. Um, oh, he's not. Yeah, he just moved to Hopkins, I think. Okay, so
okay.
all right, I think we're ready to go.
And Pulin, let us know if you want audience ask question in between. We usually have a couple of minutes at the end for questions, or people can.
Either way is fine to me. Okay, great. Thank you, Bart, for the kind introduction, and thanks for inviting me for presenting our work for this nice seminar series. So thanks again for organizing this for our community. So today, mainly I will focus on body work we've done for characterizing spatial-temporal brain dynamics and for understanding their computational or functioning mechanisms. So, the cortical circuits are composed of many excitatory and inhibitory neurons. So around 20% of them are inhibitory neurons, and 80% of them are excitatory neurons. So these neurons, they work together to give rise rich and complex dynamics that are important for brain function. So here, when you look at this figure here, individual neurons, actually, they fire in very random, irregular manner. So this is a long-standing observation in neuroscience. So here I have dot here, that's one spike, another spike. You see inter-spike intervals are very variable. So around 0 millisecond, we have stimulus onset. After stimulus onset, of course, fire rate would go up, but neural variability, is still there, although variability would be reduced a little bit. So this is quite interesting, right? So neurons, they would fire in very variable manner. However, at the circuit level, we can see many interesting emergent coherent structures. So here, this is work done by our group. This is a Utah array recording from MT area of marmoset. So the marmoset were anesthetized. That's why we have these beautiful slow oscillations. So this is delta oscillations from 1 to 4 hertz. And because when we have slow oscillations like that, and then we can get a phase of those oscillations, and then we can get a phase map as demonstrated in these figures. So apparently, by looking at these phase maps, right, without doing any further analysis, we can see this sort of beautiful, amazing coherent structure. For this case, we can see this sort of rotational spiral wave. So this, for me, so this somehow from fundamentally related to or analogous to the way how coherent structures can emerge from turbulence. Because in turbulence, we know that individual molecules, they behave very irregular manner. However, at the system level, we can see some emergent patterns. For instance, vortices, spirals, right? As demonstrated here. And in turbulence, actually, to characterize these coherent patterns or structures, often we look at the velocity vector field. So as demonstrated here, so when analyzing velocity vector field, and then we can see some singularities or critical points. So in physics literature, it's called singularities or critical points. As demonstrated here, so we have a saddle. So this is saddle. We have stable, unstable the manifolds, and here we have a spiral around here, and here we have this is for source. We have activity moving out from that singularity center. So for this for turbulence, we know that as soon as we know those singularities, we know the overall geometrical and topological structure of the flow field. So for just inspired by the physics of turbulence, we adapted some of those singularities or critical points related methods, and then we developed these methods for characterizing wave patterns in brain activity. So here, this is the slow oscillations I've just mentioned. For these slow oscillations, we can get phase map. As soon as we get phase map, and then we can look at how this phase would change across space at time, and then we can get phase velocity field as demonstrated here. And by looking at this vector field, and then we can characterize whether we have a plane waves or some other complex wave patterns organized around singularities. For instance, based on phase vector field here, and then we can get a source. So this is source pattern. So we have this singularity point here. Around that point, of course, wave speed is 0. And so we have this activity flowing out from that singularity point. And then we have sink. So here we have activity flowing toward that singularity point. And here we have saddle pattern. So we have this singularity point. We have stable, unstable manifold, and so on. And then we have spirals, rotational wave patterns, right? Spiral in and spiral out, organized around the singularity point here. And then based on these methods we've developed, and then we look at the Utah array data I've just mentioned for the slow oscillations, which are delta oscillations from 1 to 4 hertz. And we found all kinds of complex wave patterns, including source, as demonstrated here, and the sink, as shown here, and of course, spiral waves. And also, we found saddle pattern in this Utah array data set, so as organized as demonstrated here. So the things that, as I point out, as soon as we know those singularities patterns points, we know those these complex wave patterns, we know the overall geometrical and the topological structures of the flow field. And then very recently, we applied our methods to look at a whole brain, a whole cortex dynamics of the human brain. So by focusing on if my MI signals. So here, for example, this is the HCP data. So this is one time series recorded from here. This is another one recorded from this side. And then we have these slow oscillations from 0.01 to 0.01 hertz. So for these slow oscillations, we can get phase as we've done for the work we've done for the marmoset data set. And then we get phase, and then we can project phase on this flattened 2D cortical surface. So this flattened cortical surface was obtained by the HCP project. So we've project on this 2D flattened cortex. So this is for the left cortex. And then we applied our method. And immediately you can see this sort of rotational spiral waves organized around phase singularities. So so this is zoomed in version, and as you can see from this figure here, so we have this anti-clockwise spiral around here, and here we have a clockwise spiral around there, right? So we have this is for left hemisphere. Roughly, we have around 16 these spiral waves occurring simultaneously at the instantaneous time moment. So this is for spontaneous activity. So of course, I mean, for these spirals, we found that actually, if we move away from the singularity point here, actually amplitude, normalized amplitude of the fMI signal would increase, as found in other studies for spiral wave. And another interesting feature about those spirals is that actually they're organized around the boundaries of different functional networks. So this here we have 22 functional networks based on this HCP postulation. As you can see, but this is density of spirals. I mean, spirals often are often located around the boundaries. So this is quite interesting. It suggests that these spirals, right, because they have a rotational motion, and because of this rotation, if they are located around the boundary, right, because of rotation, so the activity can be organized to flow out from one area and then flow in to another area. So that's why they are often located around the boundaries of different functional regions. So as compared with plane waves, so rotational waves or spirals, they have extra degree of freedom, which is this rotational motion, right? So that's why it may have important information processing capacity. Yes, as I mentioned, okay, these spirals, they would rotate around singularity point here, and this rotational motion, right? This rotational motion is very non-stationary. So sometimes a spiral would rotate very quick, and sometimes it would rotate it slowly. So we have this sort of non-stationary rotational motion. And the singularity centers would also have interesting dynamics. So these centers would move in this kind of irregular manner. So this is, as you can see, this is one trajectory. It starts from here, and then it has this sort of like a wavy trajectories. So it means that waves in the brain, because the brain is not homogeneous media, right? So waves tend to propagate in some variable, irregular manner. If you see very beautiful, regular, smooth propagating wave, okay, that might be for some epileptic state or something like that. For the healthy brain, I mean, often we can see this sort of wavy, irregular propagating trajectories. And then to characterize such propagating dynamics, we look at the mean squared displacement. So this is a time increment. We can see this sort of super diffusion because this mean squared displacement the exponent of the diffusion is greater than 1. So this suggests that the diffusion process is super diffusion. It means that it propagates quicker than Brownian motion. And but I mean, of course, it has richer dynamics than regular smooth propagations. And these spirals actually they interact with each other in very interesting manner. So here we have this anti-clockwise, excuse me, spiral. Here I have a clockwise spiral. You see, they propagate and then approach each other, and then they interact. So for this case, after interaction, two of them, both of them would disappear. And then because of this interaction, as you can see, the vector field would be reorganized because before the propagation, we have plane wave traveling in this direction, but after interaction, we have propagating wave propagating in opposite direction, suggesting that interactions of spirals can organize overall structure or wave propagation across the cortex. Of course, we can have some cascaded interactions. So for example, here I have two spirals, they interact. After interaction, and this spiral would move and then interact with another one. So we can have this kind of cascaded interactions between different spirals. Of course, as I've just mentioned, these interactions can organize the surrounding vector fields. And these spirals, they are there and they are related to function. So here, this is for invoked activity for task-related activity. So we look at the language task from HCP, fMR data. And I mean, for this data set, we found actually these spirals, in terms of their specific rotational direction and specific spatial locations, so they are sensitive to different stages of cognitive processing for this language task. So here you can see for this example, we have an anti-clockwise spiral rotating in anti-clockwise manner. So this is for story listening task. And however, for math listening task, you can see that around the same location. So this is the place which is close to PCC. The rotational direction would be changed. And very interestingly, we can see, so this is for left hemisphere, this is for the right hemisphere. Actually, so we have this kind of inter-hemisphere, this kind of symmetrical structure for these vortices. So because, you know, we have this left and the right, and then because if you want to be symmetrical, we get fold in this manner, right? That's why, I mean, the rotational direction would be reversed. And so this is also true for another task for the story answering and the math answering task. For this case, we found this particularly around this location, which is RCP. We have this specific rotational direction for specific task. And they are, of course, statistically significant. Actually, we can decode different stages of task based on the specific rotational direction and also spatial location. I didn't show that figure, but useful information can be decoded based on these properties. So of course, for the analysis, we applied the spatial filtering because of some kind of randomness in fMR data to make sure that the spirals are robust phenomena, not artifact of something. Of course, we focus on we applied rigorous statistical test by using Nye model. So the Nye model can keep spatial and temporal correlations. It only destroys phase structure. And so all those analyses, the results I've just mentioned, they are focused on statistically significant spirals. And also, we look at R-field data without doing any spatial filtering. And we found similar these spirals. Okay, so here this is for the tri-average data. For the results I've just mentioned, they are for single trial data analysis. So this here I have this tri-average data without doing any spatial filtering. We can see this robust, this kind of spiral rotational waves, suggesting that spirals are robust phenomena that is not due to filtering or any other analysis pipeline. And also we look at original signal by doing minimal maximal normalization. And as you can see, this is for original signal without doing any filtering. You can see this sort of rotational structure around the center. Again, so this additional analysis suggests that the spirals are a robust phenomena. As I've mentioned, these spirals, they can interact with each other. So for this case, you see, I have this clockwise spiral, anti-clockwise spiral. Because of the interaction, somehow they can guide activity to flow through their interaction region. So just like this curve here. So their interaction, as demonstrated here, can facilitate the flow of activity to pass through this area, right? So it means that these interactions can function like a sort of a gate, allowing activity to flow through this area. However, while we have two spirals with the same rotational directions, as you can see here, because of the interactions, here we have a saddle pattern here, and then activity would be blocked away from this area. So we have activity flow in this direction. So just like here, I mean, sort of like a wall, right? Preventing activity flowing through this area. So just because of these kind of interesting interactions, so we can have this sort of dynamical pathway organized by interacting spirals. It's not like static pathway. Of course, in the brain, we have static structure pathways. However, on top of those static structure pathways, we have these dynamical pathways organized by interacting spirals. So here we have these four spirals. Because of their interactions, we have this large scale, this kind of traveling plane wave flowing through a large scale major part, a lot of cortical areas. And indeed, by applying this coordination, this mechanism, because of the interaction spirals, we look at this specific task again. So this language task, first, based on decoding methods, we figured out the cortical areas which are sensitive to task. And then we applied this coordination mechanism, and we found that indeed, you see, during method listening task, because of their interactions, we have this bottom-up flow of activity from anterior to posterior direction. And however, for math answering condition, you see, as you can see, the rotational directions of these patterns would be reversed. And then we would have this top-down flow of activity for this specific cognitive process. So, and to further understand the coordination mechanism I've just mentioned based on these interactions of spirals, we applied a simple nonlinear, coupled nonlinear phase oscillator model. So we have this spatially extended coupling between those phase oscillators on 2D grid, and then we can see many spirals, they interact with each other, just like what we found in the real brain data. And for these spirals, we just artificially reversed the rotational direction of one of those spirals. And as we found in the real data, so and then we can see that the corresponding flow pattern organized by these spirals can be reversed as well. So this simple modeling study again suggests that so the interactions of these spirals can organize the overall flow of activities in this dynamical system. Of course, this is a very simple phenomenological model. It's not a realistic brain model. So we've been working on modeling this dynamics now in my group. So as I mentioned, I mean, these rotational waves, they would rotate around phase singularity center. Meanwhile, the centers themselves can propagate with interesting this kind of rich complex dynamics. As I said, the dynamics can be characterized as a super diffusive motion, right? So here I want to highlight again, in the real brain, propagation waves would be anonymous diffusion instead of being regular smooth propagation because of the heterogeneous nature of the brain tissue. We have different types of neurons, and different neurons would have different numbers of connections, and so on and so forth. And so that's for functional magnetic imaging data, and we found this kind of super diffusive motion of waves in our analysis of gamma activity. So this is Utah array data for the empty area of marmoset, small monkey, and we can see that gamma activity would be organized as localized bursts, as found in other studies. So they are not persistent oscillatory component. So they are bursting activities. And very interestingly, for this Utah array recording, we found that those gamma bursts would be organized as localized wave packet. Sorry. So we have this localized packet here. So this localized packet will stay there for a while, and quickly it will shift to another location, and quickly it will shift to another location. So this again, so this can be characterized as a super diffusive motion instead of being regular propagation. So here for gamma burst, we found this sort of super diffusive motion. The similar phenomena has been found actually by Walter Freeman with his collaborator. So in this paper, they found gamma bursts would be organized as wave packets, localized wave patterns. So the center of those patterns will stay here for a while, and then later on it will shift to other locations, and so on, which is similar to what we found here based on the Utah array data. And similar, this sort of a super diffusion, which is in mathematics, this is called a super diffusive Levy motion. So super diffusive Levy motion, this type of activities have been found in hippocampus. So this is a recording from hippocampus for very quick oscillation, which is called sharp wave ripples from with this high frequency as shown here. So you can see that we have sharp wave ripple related activity position here, and quickly it shifted there, and so on. So this, we have this sort of like a super diffusive Levy motion-like activities in hippocampus. Actually here, so this is for gamma oscillations in hippocampus. So in that paper, actually people mentioned this sort of like jump, this kind of super diffusive motion-like behavior. Actually, super diffusive Levy motion has been found in many other systems. For example, when a bird flies for searching for food, the flying path would follow this sort of super diffusive motion. Okay, local movement, long-range flight, local movement, long-range flight, and so on. And also, this type of motion was first found in turbulence. So here we have this coherent pattern of vortices. Okay, vortices will stay there for a while and quickly to shift another location. So this would follow this sort of super diffusive wave motion. So based on this interesting dynamics about super diffusive wave motion, we introduced a theory which is called fractional neural sampling theory for understanding how these localized wave packets, wave patterns can do some useful function. So this is called fractional neural sampling. That's just because this specific motion can be formulated as a fractional stochastic differential equation. So that's why we call this fractional neural sampling. Because this can do very interesting probabilistic sampling computation. Because in the brain, we know that there, like in the grand theory, like Bayes inference or some other theories about the brain function, people suggested that the brain may do probabilistic this sort of inference, right? But for the math problem is that how probability distributions can be represented in the brain, right? So there are some proposals such as these papers, but for example, in this paper, which is related to the sampling idea, actually in that study they used Brownian motion or this Gaussian-like dynamics for doing sampling of probability distributions. So here, and to illustrate our theory, first we'll focus on a circuit, a realistic, biologically realistic neural circuit, and then we'll focus on mathematical theory. So here we have this biophysically realistic model, so which is integrate and firing sparking neural model with excitatory inhibitory neurons. And then we have distance dependent coupling as found in the real brain. And then we have balanced excitation and the inhibition, as I mentioned in my first slide, because we have excitatory, the inhibitory neurons. And also we considered heterogeneous synaptic coupling. For this case, we have a heterogeneous synaptic coupling weight. And another element in our model is that we have spike frequency adaptation as found in the real brain. Anyway, for this model, so we just change all the other parameters constrained by biophysics of neural circuits. So one parameter we changed is the relative ratio between excitation and the inhibition. So for this case, when inhibition is much stronger than excitation, we can see this sort of irregular asynchronous state, which is the classical balance state and studied by Polanski and others. And if we keep increasing excitation around here, when excitation is much stronger than inhibition, we can have this regular propagating wave, okay, localized regular propagating wave sweeping through this circuit model. However, very interestingly, just around the transition from the classical asynchronous state this regular propagating wave state, we'll see this sort of localized wave pattern. It will stay here for a while and quickly shift to another location. And this can be quantified as mathematically as this super diffusive Levy motion, as I've just discussed. So we and then we add input to the model here, and actually we found that actually the center of the localized wave pattern can actually do sampling based this sort of computation. Let's say it can actually infer the posterior of the external input by inferring its latent features. But anyway, this is a little bit. If you are interested in this, I can discuss the details later. But anyway, so the center can infer the posterior of the latent features of a stimulus. So for example, these latent features could be orientation of the stimulus or the color of a stimulus, right? So this pattern can do this sampling-based computation. You see, as soon as we have input here, the pattern still moves, but sometimes have this small step size, sometimes it has big step size. Overall, the pattern will still move in this super diffusive and Levy motion manner. And another interesting property of this, the dynamics of this pattern is that actually, when we look at autocorrelation of the trajectory of the pattern, we can see this sort of damping oscillatory component, which is theta oscillation. So we've done this dynamical system analysis. We found that this theta oscillation is related to bifurcation, Hopf bifurcation of the model. And indeed, we've found that, so this pattern can sample the posterior because the error decreases to 0. So that's for the circuit implementation. And then we look at the mathematical aspect of this dynamics. So to capture this spatial temporal dynamics of the wave packet I've just mentioned, because here we have this stochastic differential equation. So different from the stochastic differential equation for formulating Brownian motion. So here we have this Brownian motion here. Oh, no, we have Levy motion here. But for classical stochastic Langevin equation, so here we have a Brownian motion. But for our model here, this is replaced by Levy motion because we want to capture mathematically the Levy motion of those wave packets, right? And additionally, because of theta oscillation I've just mentioned, so additionally, we introduced momentum term, which is related to this drift term, or momentum term here. So this momentum term would give rise to this theta oscillation or oscillatory component. So this is drift term. Drift term is related to the probabilistic landscape, right? So mathematically, we can prove through solving a fractional Fock-Plug equation. So we can actually, this sampler can sample any probabilistic distributions if you, by following this relationship. This is drift term, which is this, okay? This is the target distribution our wave packet wanted to sample, right? So they follow this relationship, and this is related to, as I mentioned, this fractional Folk-Plug equation. So this is just a trace for this mathematical model. You see, this is for our case where we have when alpha is smaller than 2, greater than 1, we have Levy motion. But beta is a non-zero value, we have a oscillatory component as found in our dynamics for as we found for the dynamics of our wave package. But for this case, I mean, we have Levy motion, but no oscillation. For this case, here we have a Brownian motion with oscillation. For this case, this is just a conventional Langevin dynamics, right? We have this process driven by Levy motion, no oscillator component. And then, so the key computational advantage of our this wave packet dynamics is that it can freely sample complex probability distribution functions. So here I can show you an example. So here I have these distributions with 2 modes. Here, another here, with a large distance between these two modes, right? For conventional theory, as demonstrated here, you see because of the lack of long jumps or long range movement, the sampler or the pattern would be trapped to local minima. This one mode here, right? So this is the case, it would be trapped, although for this case we have oscillatory component, but the pattern would be trapped to that mode. But for Levy motion, because of this Levy motion, we have these long jumps, right? So the pattern can freely switching back and forth between different modes to sample complex distributions. So this is our case. So this is our theoretical prediction. So our theory predicts that if we increase the modal separation, which is a distance between the 2 modes, for our theory, we will see this linear increase of the mean exit time. Mean exit time is the average time for the pattern to stay in one of those modes. But however, for conventional theory, we would see this sort of exponential, this kind of increase. So, and then we look at to test this in our spark neural circuit model. And indeed, we can see, okay, for our spark neural circuit model, because we have that localized wave packet, we can see the wave packet can switch back and forth between different these kind of modes or inputs, and also it can sample this 2-modal distributions with a linear increase of mean exit time as predicted by our mathematical theory. And then we applied this fractional neural sampling to explain perceptual inference. I mean, this is an experimental paper on this perceptual inference task for inferring this motion direction as demonstrated here. And anyway, so I mean, we found that actually this theory can explain the mean of the posterior, which would increase in this manner with the modal separation, and also we can explain the STD standard derivation, how it changes with the modal separation between the prior and the likelihood. And this is another example, okay, as demonstrated in that experimental study. So we can explain this change of mean and the standard derivation of the inferred posterior, which are consistent with a real experimental study. And then we applied this theory for looking at attention. So attention is very important, particularly if we think about current transformer models, right? So transformer models are based on the self-attention mechanism. So here, this is classical model of attention. So this paper has been widely cited, highly cited, more than 10,000 times. But the idea is that, so we have this winner take all, this mechanism or attractor mechanism. So here, so we let's say when we look at this picture here, so of course our attention would first be targeted to this money bag because we all like money, right? So attention would be targeted to that money bag. And then here we have winner take all, so we have attractor there. But since that how your winner or attractor can then move away from that target, which is money bag, to other places, right? So in this model, they've introduced additional mechanism, which is inhibition of return. So they add extra inhibitory mechanism. So that would kill some activities here, and then your attention can move to other places. So so it means that it's not very flexible in the sense that you get, I mean, somehow introduce additional mechanism. So actually, this super Levy motion can explain attention sampling quite nicely. So here first we focus on this distributed spatial attention task. So with these two targets for detecting a change for either of these objects. So we can see our pattern can freely switching back and forth between those objects for sampling potential change in those objects. And while we have pattern here, sparking pattern here, as you can see from this raster plot, so we will have a localized gamma bursts, and gamma burst, and gamma burst. So this gamma burst would occur around 4 times per second. So so that's why they are coupled to theta oscillation, because in our model, as I mentioned, we have theta oscillation because of the adaptation. And this model will explain some experimental observations about spatial attention sampling as found in this paper. And another key advantage of our sampling mechanism is that actually this sampling can provide the system with the freedom to switch between exploration and exploitation. Because here we have these two objects, so the pattern would sample these two objects. Of course, it can sample other places as well. So it means that it can explore other choices during the sampling process. And then we applied this theory for looking at how two different cortical circuits interact with each other. So for this case, I have two cortical circuits. So this one can be interpreted as a frontal eye field. This can be interpreted as feed-forward. And then we have this feed-forward, feedback connections. As you can see here, because of these interactions, right? I mean, so these patterns, sometimes they would be aligned. And when they aligned, they have this kind of resonance-like interactions. And then they would do their own business, and then they may align at another location. So in this manner, so they can do this kind of flexible communication between these two cortical areas. So when they interact, when they aligned, so they interact, right? Because of feed-forward, feedback interactions, and there's kind of resonance like or ignition-like phenomena. The fun rate would go up. Meanwhile, we have this transient synchronization between the gamma burst. So in this manner, so actually our model can explain gamma synchronization-based communication. Meanwhile, because we have this localized coherent patterns, right? So the model can also explain subspace-based communication. So in this sense, our fractional neural sampling-based communication can unify two different ideas proposed for understanding cortical communication. And of course, the model can explain other phenomena, I mean, as found in experimental studies, okay, in terms of local modulation of cortical states, and reduction of neural variability, and spark count correlations, and so on. So this all can be formulated based on that mathematical model. So by looking at that mathematical model, we can explain those experimental observations. And at the moment, so to test our theoretical predictions, we've been working with Professor Pascal Fries, because in his lab, they found this kind of searching behavior based on eye movements, because eye movements, fixation points are the proxy of attention fixation point. So we will look at the searching behavior guided by attention, because in their data, they already found the theta oscillations. You can see from this preprint. And also they have neural recordings for FEF and V4. And preliminarily, we found this super diffusion motion as demonstrated here from Pascal's data set. All right, just a quick summary. So in this presentation, mainly talked about singularity-mediated wave patterns such as spirals. I've demonstrated how the interactions of those singularities can organize large-scale brain dynamics and function. And additionally, I presented our theory, fractional neural sampling, and I demonstrated how this theory can explain some brain functions such as perceptual inference, attention, and communication between different cortical areas. I want to thank my team and so here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pulin. That was great.
All right, so we can open questions. I actually have a question. How do you initiate the spirals? How are they initiated and how are they controlled?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because in our another modeling study, I didn't mention that modeling study because the initialization of spiral is related to for our spark neural circuit model. We had a paper published in Journal of Neuroscience that was in 2016. But anyway, so we found that's related to the local this kind of balance condition between excitation and inhibition. So somehow around, for example, if excitation is a little bit stronger than inhibition, and then we have activity spiral out from that area, and then we have this kind of rotational spiral wave formed, right? So we have a paper on that. In terms of how, of course, I mean, in other studies, let's say in that preprint, I mean, they found spirals in the mouse data, right? I think so. In that data set, they found spirals would be related to the circular structure of axons, right? So that's related to this structure of axon, this connection, this structure and anatomic structure. I think there are two mechanisms. One is related to this anatomic structure. Another is neurophysiological mechanism related to balanced excitation and inhibition. And in terms of how this can be controlled, I think that's that's very profound question. We've been working on that because you see, because these patterns they are organized around singularities, and the singularities. So often in physics, if you want to control these patterns, you just control the singularities, and then the patterns would be controlled and modulated automatically. So we've been working on that. So by doing the TMS experiment and also by through combining with modeling study.
How about Nick Wilkinson? I think he's next. Go ahead. You want to unmute yourself?
Okay, here I am. Thank you, Bud. Thank you, Pulin. That was like a kind of mind-blowing talk. So I wrote a paper like 10 years ago about eye movements and how their super diffusive nature might suggest a kind of turbulent control mechanism like the one that you're starting to unpack here. So this is like super exciting for me. So I have kind of two questions. One is about the singularity and its surrounding area. Might we see this as a kind of what might become a very general sampling kernel in the same way that the Gaussian is, for example?
Oh yeah. I think I mean because for the sampling, because in our that spark neural circuit modeling study, right? Because the pattern would move in this super diffusive Levy manner, right? And then it can sample complex probability distributions, which otherwise can't be done by a Brownian motion-based propagation or can't be done by regular smooth propagation of traveling waves, right? So that's why we need these complex dynamics. So that's for our spark neural circuit study. But for our data analysis results related to brain spirals, so we found that phase singularity centers, indeed, they would propagate in this super diffusive way as well.
And then my second question is, do you think that having a probabilistic computational medium like the p-bits that some people are trying to develop, is this something that would be very beneficial for this form of computing? And might this form of computing offer a useful paradigm for operating in p-bit based systems?
Yeah, maybe. I'm not familiar with that topic, but anyways, because think about the brain, because neural activities are very noisy and stochastic, right? And so we have to think about how these noisy activities can be exploited for some useful functions, right? So that's why
Yes.
the probabilistic computations do make sense from this aspect. Yeah.
So I then have one more question. My brother works in hardware and chip design, and he's getting trying to get people together into a probabilistic computing sort of community. So would it be okay for him to drop you an email?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Great, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you.
We have a new question in the chat about the heterogeneity in connection. You can come up and ask if you'd like.
Let me see.
Yeah, can I talk with you?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks for great talk. I'm from Japan and I
Okay.
enjoyed. Okay, so I'm very curious about your brain activity was very different from the task. Reading or mathematical something is very diverse, and I'm also think about some connectivity between such area is very asymmetric, yeah, and highly unregulated manner. So, do you think how much such a structure regulates the dynamics? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Actually, that's related to the point I mentioned. So heterogeneity, because I mean the heterogeneity nature of something, right? Connectivity, activities, would collectively give rise to this sort of like anonymous diffusion instead of smooth, regular this sort of propagation wave patterns. And secondly, as you mentioned, some other overall structure, because I mean, people found like gradient structure for the human brain, this organization or the gradient of a synaptic coupling strength, and they do play a role in terms of guiding the propagation of waves. There are some papers showing that waves would tend propagate along the gradient, right? Which we point out in our papers as well. So they would tend propagate forward along the gradient, backward along the gradient. So that's really just like you have this field. The field would be modulated by extra the field, right? So you have the gradient, and the activity would flow along the gradient. That's one thing. And another thing related to heterogeneity. So in terms of heterogeneous the synaptic coupling numbers and also coupling weights. So we have another study. So in that study, which is a purely theoretical study, in that study we found heterogeneity in terms of coupling weights, because in real experiment, people found that coupling weights would follow this sort of heavy tilt log normal or power law distribution, right? So we found this heterogeneous heavy tilt coupling weights would expand this dynamical regime I've mentioned for spark neural circuit model. So make this complex dynamics with a super diffusive motion, make that regime more robust. It means that the heterogeneity can provide robustness for the emergence of those interesting dynamics without fine-tuning the parameters. Because think about it, who's tuning the parameter of our brain, right? So these extra heterogeneous factors somehow can make this happen in a robust manner.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Pulin, I had a question for you. For this great talk, it's sad that I came a little late due to something.
Yeah. Thank you.
For you is you had a slide in the middle showing that the spiral, I believe, point was to show that spiral waves moving across space were jumping from location to location, and that these effects were present in many different brain regions. And you showed data from the hippocampus. Is that right?
Oh yeah, hippocampus. Yes. Yeah, that's for sharp repo.
Right, but I mean, and your point was to show that these are general phenomena, that these are present at many frequencies in brain regions, right?
Yeah.
But I think and I take your general point, and I think it's really interesting, but I think the hippocampus data that you showed was about something very different. I think that was about the location in physical space of a rat running through an environment, because the units were centimeters and they were like hundreds of centimeters on that plot. Unless
you're right.
Or is that what you meant?
Yeah. I meant to say, because for that one, yes, you are right. That's because they have sharp repo, right? Because based on sharp repo, they can they decode the position encoded by sharp repo, and then they had that figure, right? So that's as you said, that's about this kind of encoded position from sharp-range repo, right? And of course, in hippocampus, we don't have this kind of spatial dependent coupling and so on. Yeah, our main point is that because in our modeling study, if you decode this encoded information based on this Levy motion, you can get a similar thing. So sorry, I didn't mention that explicitly. So in that sense, you see from functional level and from the dynamics level, they could be mechanistic related. But for hippocampus, you are right.
So that was not a
Yeah.
mistake. So that your point is that that the content of the information might be jumping around in the same way that the information that some other times oscillations in the cortex are jumping around,
Yes, exactly.
right? That's a
Yes,
very
yes.
I wasn't
So
sure if you were
there,
making a mistake or if you were no, that you're not making a mistake. It's a very deep point. I need to think about that one. That's interesting.
yeah, thank you. I didn't mention that. Yes, so that's a thing. Yeah, so that's an encoded position. And actually, there's a paper on that, right? I can send you that paper. They did develop a mathematical model for modeling that.
Which
The
paper? Yeah,
hippocampus
send it to
activity.
me. Yeah, we
Yeah.
can go on, but I would like to know more. Tell me more later. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you so much. This is interesting.
Thank you, Josh.
Are there more questions, Uma?
I think somebody named A Pines raised their hand, but I don't know if they're.
Yeah, we have
Go ahead, Apon. Yeah, Apon. Go ahead, Uma. You got it. I'm muting
Yeah.
myself.
Hey, thanks so much for the talk. I'll try and keep it short since I know we're out of time, but I've really looked to your work for a long time for inspiration. Find it super cool for lots of reasons. I
Thank
have a
you.
few questions I'd love to ask, but I'll stick with just one since we're kind of limited at the moment. And it has to do, I guess, with one of the more technical details, but using the Hilbert transform makes some type of soft assumption of periodicity, which is a fair one in many cases. But I guess I'm wondering if you guys use that operation because you believe, yes, everything we care about in this particular instance is periodic, or if it's more of the toolkit that this opens up for stuff like gradient phase vectors and everything that comes along with it is just more practical in that instance.
I think that's a latter case. So for the latter case, I mean, we are aware of that. And of course, there are some other methods for looking at activities without clear oscillatory components, such as generalized phase, developed by Lyle Muller's group. They published that paper somewhere. Anyway, but in our additional analysis, we did find the phase map obtained through Hilbert transformation would be very similar to the phase map obtained from the generalized phase analysis. Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And thanks again for the talk and all the amazing work you've been putting out.
Thank you.
I will ask a quick one. Pulin, that was a great talk. I enjoyed the
Thank
second
you.
part of it as well. I'm curious if this Levy motion is, if you think about it as the Occam's razor, isn't it possible to model all those long jumps that you want to get out of Levy motion with a combination of Brownian motions instead of just taking the variables from space, taking that to some sort of internal variable and model the same phenomenon that you want with a combination of Brownian motions?
Yeah. So yeah, indeed, there are some models. So by combining local Brownian motion with a long-range propagation, right, we can get similar this super diffusive Levy motion-like dynamics. Of course, there are many other mathematical models which can do that. But for our case, because we wanted to formulate it based on rigorous mathematical analysis, so that's why we use the Langevin-like equation, but with a Levy motion, so that we can solve the equation based on this beautiful mathematical framework, which is fractional Fock-Park equation. So we can do this rigorously.
But you need some sort of infinite variances for Levy motion here.
Yes, exactly. But in reality, of course, variance is finite, right? And so, but there are some studies showing, for example, if we have this kind of distribution with a cutoff, I mean, the overall still, I mean, statistics would follow similar this sort of distributions, similar statistics. But this infinity variance is just for the mathematical convenience, for the mathematical solvable case, right? But in reality, I mean, just like in real world, I mean, we don't have this kind of infinity variance situations, but this is purely for mathematical elegance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pulin. That was great. If there aren't any more questions, I think we'll wrap up. Okay.
Pulin, thank you for waking up early for us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for staying late. I think it's maybe time for for dinner, right? For you guys. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.